I'm sure you're all aware or familiar with. If you don't know it very well, we've all probably in high school had to read something of the Iliad and Odyssey. Right? We had to read that. Homer wrote it. Those were the Greeks. That was their version of what happened. And of course, you know what happened to Troy, right? Remember? The handsome young son, prince of King Priam of Troy, was visiting the Greeks, and King Menelaus had a lovely wife, a beautiful wife named Helen. They fell in love, Paris and Helen. So Paris took her back with him to Troy. When this happened, you can imagine how King Menelaus felt. She was his prized possession. She was beautiful beyond compare. And so he called all his fellow city-states, all the warriors, to come with him in their ships. They went and sailed to Troy, landed on the shore, and spent 10 years there. 10 years holding Troy in siege, because Troy's walls were so strong, nobody could get in. Well, finally, after 10 years, they thought, we better do something. Maybe there's something else we can do. And Ulysses, I think, came up with this idea. So they built a huge, beautiful wooden horse. It was hollow inside. There was a trap door, and there was a space for people to hide. Ulysses and a few of the other warriors, they went up into the horse. They hid there. And the rest of the Greeks, they went by ship out of sight, but nearby. When the Greeks left and the ships could no longer be seen, well, the Trojans were elated. Can it be that we are finally free of these Greeks, that we can come out of hiding, out of the city? And so they did. They opened the gates, and there they saw on the shore that amazing wooden horse. King Priam went over to it and looked, and perhaps his pride was touched, because he thought, they have surrendered and they are paying homage to me and to Troy with this horse. A few of the others argued, no, I don't think so. I wouldn't trust Greeks. But they took that horse. It was on a big platform with rollers, and they took it into the city and closed the city gates. And then they had a fantastic party. They had a great time. They had food and drink, and they danced, and they had more food, and they drank more, and they danced, and they drank, and they danced, and they drank, until they all went to sleep in a drunken stupor. Now, Ulysses and his men opened that trap door, climbed out of the horse, opened the gates to the city, went out, shone a light as a signal to the ships, and the others came back. And they entered the city to rampage and ransack it. Here's where our hero enters. Because you see, I'm going to tell you just the beginning, because it's very long, of the Aeneid by Virgil. And the hero is not Ulysses, it's Aeneas. Aeneas awoke to the sound of fighting and shouting and the smell of smoke in the air. He went up to the top floor, veranda on the top of their house, and he looked out, and all the houses around him were burning, except his. And the reason only could be because the trees had hidden his house. And it struck him to the core. He knew what had happened. It was that Trojan horse It was no gift. Instead, it brought the Greeks into his city. He was filled with bloodlust. He wanted to get revenge. He wanted to kill every Greek he could. So he ran down, he put on his armor, he grabbed his sword, left the house without saying anything to his family. They were all still sleeping. He went out in the streets, he began to fight. He met up with other Trojans also fighting. They formed a little company and they went through the streets fighting the Greeks as best they could. Once they completely annihilated the company and they put on their armor and their clothes, and now they could really sneak up on the Greeks because they looked like they were Greek. As they made their way through the city, he finally arrived at the palace of the king, King Priam. He left his men. He slipped in a hidden back door because, being royalty and a family member, he knew where to go. He got inside and he went as quickly as he could up to the level where King Priam's private quarters were, where all his family stayed. And then when he got there, he stopped in horror because before him, he saw at the family altar a tall, stately, but weak old king, wearing his armor and holding a spear to protect his family. His wife, Hecuba, the children behind him at the altar. The old king threw the spear. It clattered uselessly on the stone floor. And before he could do anything, Aeneid saw one of the Greek warriors run his sword right through the king. When Priam fell, his wife began to scream and cry, and all were weeping at the death of their king, his blood flowing out and desecrating the altar. It was at that moment that Aeneid realized he had left his family alone. He had left his father, his aged father, a king as well, the same age as Priam, the only one to protect his wife and son. And he knew he had to get back. So he turned to leave. But when he did, out of the corner of his eye, he saw Helen lurking in the shadows. And he was overcome by seeing her there, and he thought to himself, "You're the one. It's all because of you that my peaceful city has been destroyed." So he reached for his sword and he went to slay her when suddenly who appeared in front of him but the goddess Venus, the goddess of love. She happens to be his mother. You see, when his father Anchises was a young, dashing young man, he fell in love and she fell in love with him, and Aeneid was the result. Mother, what are you doing? What are we to do? And she said, Aeneid, it is not Helen's fault. It's not Paris's fault. It's the gods. The gods are against Troy. The gods have decided that this must happen. My son, I want you to live, and you have a purpose. You have a destiny. Go back to your family. I've been watching over them, keeping them safe. Go back and take them from the city. Go out on the seas and travel until you find a land where we can have a new Troy, a new nation. And before he could touch her or say anything, she was gone. And so Aeneid made his way out of the palace back to the streets. He didn't try to fight, he tried to hide until he could get back to his home. And when he got there, it still wasn't on fire. He went in, his family was alive. He was so relieved. He went to his wife his father, he said, we must go. We must go to establish a new Troy. This city is gone. It is destroyed by the Greeks. His old father, Anchises, he said, oh, son, I'm too old. I'll only slow you down. I'm going to stay. I want to stay in my city. I'll die in my city of Troy. No, father, no, you must come. I need you. I need your wisdom, your knowledge. No, son, I'm staying here. Well, as much as Aeneas pleaded and argued, he could not change his father's mind. So he said, very well, we're all going to stay. We will all die with the city. I will die fighting. And as he started to turn to go out into the street again, his wife, Creusa, came over, touched him, said, husband, what are you thinking? Do you not care what happens to me and to our son? He was such a small boy. At that moment, when Aeneas hesitated, a miracle happened. All of a sudden, a white light shone down into the house right onto his son. And then holy flames began to dance all around the boy's body. And even though they weren't burning, his parents both got spring water and washed them away. The boy was fine. His father, he said, Jupiter, is this a sign that I am to go? If it is, give me another sign. And at that moment, a shooting star went across the sky, followed by the boom of thunder, and his father agreed to leave with his son. Well, Aeneas was thrilled. He gathered everybody quickly. He put his father on his back. He took his little son by the hand, and Creusa followed behind, and they went out into the street, careful to avoid any fighting. But they hadn't gone far when his father, being up high, said, oh, Greeks over there, soldiers coming our way, run. And so Aeneas began to run as best he could with his father on his back and a small boy by the hand. He began to run through the streets away from the fighting here and there, hoping no one could follow till he got to the gates of the city. He went out. He went down to the water, and there was Ceres' altar. That's where he left, took his father off his back. He said, we're safe. He turned back around looking for Creusa, but she wasn't there. Creusa, where are you? She was gone. So he hid his son and his father in the rocks, and he ran back into the city again. This time, he tried to retrace his steps. He went back to their home. It was in flames. No one was there. He made his way all the way back to the palace, and when he did, the Greeks had surrounded it. There were captive Trojan women and children being held there, but his wife was not there. He turned around to leave, and just at that moment, she appeared. Creusa, I'm so glad you're not alive. It was her ghost. He began to weep and rail at himself for not being more careful, and she said, shh, it's not your fault. Juno, she won't let me leave the city. I'm to stay in Troy. But Aeneas, I see it all now, clearly. are to be the one who leads our people free, who finds a land where you can form a city and a new Troy. You'll marry a woman, a princess, and that's good. But you must go. Please remember me as your wife, as the daughter-in-law of a goddess. He tried 3 times to hug her, but it was like putting your arms through mist, and she disappeared. This time, when Aeneas made his way back toward the city gates, there was no fighting. There were no shouts of war, only the silence of death. When he got out of the city gates and he went down to the altar series, his father and son were safe. But not only that, there was a multitude of Trojans who had made it out and who survived the war all around, and it gave Aeneas hope. So he stood up high on a rock and he spoke to the people. He said, "My fellow Trojans, it is our destiny and the will of the gods that we go. Maybe on a long, arduous journey, but we go out across the seas and found a new city, a new Troy. Think not about the past, but look forward to a new beginning." And so began the journey of Aeneas, a long, arduous one, to a land called Latinia. And in Latinia, he established a city that became the heart of the most powerful nation in all of the Western world. Rome